Yeah, we're about to hear from Yield10. Have a really interesting platform technology with some exciting implications for a lot of different industries and making a lot of different industries more sustainable. Um, I personally work at Clean Tech Group, but happy to be chatting with Ollie today.
Beautiful. All right, I will get out of your way and let you do your thing. Let me know if you have any technical difficulties. Standing
All
by.
right,
All right,
will do.
thanks.
Thank you. All right, awesome. We don't have too much time, so Ollie, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well, Cassidy. Nice to be with you.
Nice. So to kick us off, at a high level, just tell us more about your platform technology and the industries and markets you're looking to address in the near term and long term.
Yeah, so the platform technology, we call it the Trait Factory, is really a system based on a very unique gene discovery tool for improving crops. We call that grain. But that's combined with essentially genetic engineering to make those genetic modifications in the crop. And the crop they mostly work in is an oilseed called camelina, which has tremendous potential as a new crop for sustainable agriculture. Out of that Trait Factory comes really two very different opportunities. One is really licensing those traits to the major seed companies, and we have relationships in place with four big seed players: Bayer, Forage, GDM, and Simplot. The other is really using camelina. So every time we discover a trait that improves the performance of camelina, and there is a driver to determine if it has performance improvements in other crops, that improved variety actually represents a step change in the value of the camelina as a new seed for the agricultural sector. And so there we're really looking at, essentially using camelina as a platform crop to produce essentially fuel, basically food, and ultimately PHA bioplastics.
Very cool. And could you tell me about maybe some of the land use implications of using camelina and using this technology rather than using traditional crops or traditional solutions?
Yeah, there's a number of reasons why camelina is really very exciting. First of all, it's got a very short growth cycle. It grows very quickly, about 100 days from sort of planting to harvest. That's very, very fast. And what that does is it opens up opportunities in the Pacific Northwest in particular. And it's a very interesting rotation crop with some of the crops grown there like wheat, pulses, and canola. The second attribute of it is because, again, fast growth cycle, it's a very exciting platform for what we would call a sustainable cover crop. In other words, for double cropping or relay cropping in the Corn Belt. And the reason that the cover crops are of growing importance is really to reduce some of the negative impacts of commodity agriculture, which is really nutrient runoff, and to restore soil carbon. So you've got these sustainability benefits with a very unique platform that happens to be, for some reason, biologically, extremely well suited to making new high-value products, and we're targeting two very high-value products for this platform.
Yeah, could you tell me a little bit more about that, some of the products that you're targeting, and how this can improve the sustainability of those products?
Yeah, so I would say, the one that's actually I would say closest to hand is really just the use of camelina as a sort of a low-carbon index oil for use in renewable diesel. That's obviously a more economically challenging value proposition. But what we're seeing with the 5.5 billion gallons of renewable diesel capacity being installed in the US, either has been installed or is being installed, is you're going to have a supply-demand disconnect with vegetable oil to supply essentially low carbon fuels. And so you've got that aspect of it. The second one is really something that we're really excited about, which is a plant-based drop-in replacement for fish oil. And so when you think of fish oil, you'll obviously be aware of all the nutraceutical applications, DS red, red krill oil, omega-3s, EPA, DHA oil, which is really, really important for human health, development, and wellness. And the primary source of that oil is actually harvested fish from the ocean, either consumed directly, but increasingly used as feed for aquaculture. So if you think about salmon as being a great source of omega-3 fatty acids, very healthy, very nutritious protein, that omega-3 fatty acid is actually coming from harvested fish from the ocean. And there what you're seeing is reduced supply as overfishing, which will of course be increased with global population growth, really is creating a big disconnect. It's not sustainable. So we have a drop-in replacement, plant-based source of fish oil based on engineered camelina systems.
That's very exciting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
And maybe in the longer term, what are some of the other markets that you're targeting?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we believe is really an absolute game changer is, and this is a concept that I would say came to fruition very recently from the point of view of an overnight sort of technology success, which was 30 years in the making, and that's actually totally legit. This concept behind this, actually, I filed the first patent on at MIT many years ago. I'm not going to say how many decades, but it was more than one. But in the last year and a half, the technology team has actually made great progress in demonstrating that there's another path towards commercializing this. So it's still early days. It's going to take another 4 or 5 years. But what it really represents is a way to capture carbon from the air and make a sustainable, very low cost bioplastic directly in camelina seed, with two really important co-products, which is oil, which can go to renewable diesel, and protein, which can go into food production. So it's really a sort of tremendous sustainability story around essentially renewable fuel, food, and PHA bioplastic. The difference being that it's all driven by enhanced economics and low cost.
That's really interesting. And outside of just further developing the technology, what are some other key market enablers, whether it's regulatory or economic, that are going to drive some of those end markets to want to adopt more sustainable solutions?
Yeah, I would say that in the nearest term, the renewable fuel is driven by the low carbon fuel standards. So basically, this is really creating tremendous investment in what they call renewable diesel. And to make renewable diesel, you take waste oil. Well, given the volumes that are being produced already, most of the waste oil is probably being used up. So what's happening is you're seeing a supply-demand disconnect in vegetable oil, which is why you're seeing booming commodity prices in agriculture, as the demand for this oil is driving more production. So that's a big driver. It's driven by the low carbon fuel standard. I think inevitably a technology like that, as vegetable oil prices in the grocery store increase, well, you're going to have the same food v fuel debate. So over the longer term, we think the answer to that is to use camelina as a second crop. So you're actually adding to the production. And we've got some calculations that would show by growing camelina in the same sort of growing, in sequential growing seasons in a 12-month period with soybean, you could double the oil production. So, there's some tremendous upside in this driven by that. The omega oils is, again, a strong desire for sustainability, but it's also, I think, economics. Simply put, there isn't enough fish oil left in the sea to supply the growing demand in aquaculture, and salmon production is growing at sort of 7% per year. And we see an opportunity there to generate somewhere around $500 million by 2030. So tremendous opportunities. And then PHA bioplastic. The main driver is actually, it's not regulation. It's actually consumer backlash against the failure of a lot of recycling and the transport of plastic waste to China being banned. And suddenly the whole entire, I would say, consumer products food sector is getting a lot more active in this space versus, I would say, the raw petroleum resin producers who would obviously like to maintain the status quo. So you're seeing drivers from the large companies, and all of this stuff ties into ESG investing. Our difference is we're really focused on, strong ESG profile, very sustainable, carbon negative, but more importantly, cost effective. It's got to be cost effective or cost advantaged, and we think we have a deal with that.
Absolutely. I mean, we have a low carbon fuel standard here in California, and I wouldn't be surprised if there were a nationwide version of that in the coming years. So I imagine that industry will really take off.
It started with California, but Washington State, Oregon, Canada, a number of the countries in the EU. Looks like the UK is going the same way. And there's an inevitable consequence to this, new use or added use, which is supply demand. And the reality of it is in agriculture, and why agriculture is so exciting, there's only so much land and so much water available to produce these raw materials, whether it's for food or for fuels or bioplastics. And so we feel we've got a great position now.
Yeah, absolutely. So on that note, what kind of traction have you seen so far? And then what are your growth and commercialization plans in the coming years?
Yeah, so right now I would say we are seeing traction. Initially, there's two areas of traction. One is really in the renewable fuel space. We're now receiving inbound inquiries around, where things are at with Camelina. So actually, we have been quite public about scaling up seed production. It takes time to actually get enough seed to plant a large number of acres. And that's one challenge. The second challenge is doing that prematurely, sort of on spec, if you like. It is not necessarily a good strategy. And so there's two good examples of what's really worked in the space. I think there's the older example of Dow AgroScience with its high oleic canola that was very successful, but where they were patient and secured offtake agreements for the end product, primarily in Japan, and they shared the value proposition with the growers, and they literally had a relatively straightforward path forward. And there's another example, Calyx, which tried to sort of go out in front of itself and started scaling up prematurely without having those offtake agreements. So we're going to follow the Dow Ag model, which is we're right now ramping up our business development activities and conversations with some of the renewable fuel companies, looking for offtake arrangements to sort of underwrite that aspect of the business. The oils, we only secured that technology back in fourth quarter last year. And so even so, we're actually, we're able to play off a strong history of feed companies looking at that particular product. And I would say the feedback so far has been very, very encouraging, but obviously it's pretty early days. We've only really had this in hand for about 5 months. And then in the PHAs, it's a little frustrating. I was actually probably the founder of the field of synthetic biology and PHA production out of MIT, and we had a company called Metabolics, which of course ran into the same headwinds when you hit the feed v fuel and you compete with petroleum resources. The industry and the investor community lost interest in renewables and biodegradables back in 2014-15. So we ended up selling the fermentation platform to a Korean company, which has actually now built a plant. So obviously we get tremendous numbers of inbound inquiries. And what we hear is and it doesn't matter how big the company is, these are the largest food companies in the world. The interesting thing is it's always the same thing, which is they've got to do something. They're excited about PHA bioplastics. They know it checks all the boxes. It really is degradable in all the environments. It makes good plastic products, cost and scale. And what the Camelina represents is a way to address both cost and scalability of this technology and make a meaningful dent in the plastic food packaging and serviceware area with a truly degradable material.
Thank you, Ollie and Cassidy. We are at time, so final remarks, please.
Yeah, so it's a very exciting time for Yield10. Obviously, we've made a lot of progress on the Camelina business plan with two, I would say, initiatives really beginning to show great promise. Starting roughly in Q4 last year, obviously based on a tremendous amount of earlier investment. And then we're seeing this upsurge in interest in camelina oil in general from the renewable fuel sector. So I would say we're extremely well positioned in this. We still continue to supply trait targets to large seed companies, but right now we see just a tremendous upside for Yield10 as a specialty camelina company producing some really unique products.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to keeping up with your progress and keeping tabs on how you're doing in the future. But it's a great conversation and enjoyed being here.
Well, I enjoyed the conversation too, Cassidy, and it's great talking with you. And it's a pretty exciting time to be in ag in general. So thank you very much.